Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Gulf deal failure renews Yemeni plan to march to the palace. Rights organization condemns Bahrain's assault on medics and patients. And Assad regime denounces US sanctions. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
Damascus condemned the U.S. sanctions against President Bashar al-Assad and a number of his senior assistants, saying they targeted the Syrian people. He said that the sanctions will not affect what he referred to as independent Syria's resolution and resistance.
In turn, Amnesty International welcomed Washington's decision and called on the U.S. president to impose an arms embargo on Syria.
On the ground, Syrian rights sources reported that 8 civilians were killed yesterday when Syrian tanks shelled neighborhoods in the town of Talkalakh, bordering Lebanon. This raises the number of deaths in the town to 35 in the last 4 days.
As events continue to develop in Syria, its political situation is divided into two scenes. One is composed of images uploaded online by the opposition and activists, and the other is the regime's perspective manifested in the state media. With these two scenes and the absence of independent media to film the events in Syria, viewers are awash in contradicting reports. In the latest report by the opposition, videos filmed at night were uploaded online and were said to be of protests that erupted yesterday. The most notable protest was in the Maidan neighborhood of the capital Damascus. Similar protests denouncing the regime also took place in the Rastan region of Homs province.
في حلب التي لم يعرف عنها أنها بؤرة توتر في المشهد الذي ترسمه المعارضة.
In Aleppo, which is said to be the center of tension in the scene depicted by the opposition, protests occurred inside the university campus. At the end of the protests, security forces interfered and arrested protesters. None of this was mentioned in the state media's reports. These videos of yesterday's protests in various parts of Syria negate President Bashar al-Assad's statement that the crisis in the country is close to an end.
المقرب من الحكومة عن أن الأزمة في البلاد توشك على الانتهاء.
Assad's statement was quoted by a private website called Al-Watan, which is closely connected to the government. However, the website said that Assad met with members of a family who discovered 5 of their family members' bodies in Daraa 2 days ago. Rights groups said that it was a mass grave.
وزاد الموقع على ذلك بالقول إن الأسد وعد بالتحقيق الفوري فيما.
The website added that Assad promised to immediately investigate what he considered a gruesome crime. Both sides acknowledged the deaths, but have different explanations for them. Syrian state TV aired images of what it said to be a stable and normal situation in Damascus. Perhaps the state media is trying to refute the opposition's images in a media war fueled by the events.
The
markets and businesses are all normal, and the streets are full of people and shoppers. There is nothing disturbing this country.
لكن معارضين سوريين نفوا مشاهد الاستقرار.
But Syrian opposition figures denied these scenes of stability and said they were fabricated by the authority. They referred to the continuing tension in Talkalakh near Homs to prove their point. An opposition activist whose identity was not revealed told the Associated Press that 8 people were killed on Wednesday in the town of Talkalakh bordering Lebanon, and that the number of fatalities raised to 34 after the Syrian army shelled the town. According to the AP, the same activist said that 19 Syrian soldiers were killed in the town, but the people responsible for their killing is unknown.
17 جنديا سوريا قتلوا في البلدة من دون تحديد الجهة التي تقف وراء قتلهم.
As the situation continued, the West increased its pressure on the Syrian regime. Hours after the U.S. imposed sanctions on Assad and some key members of his regime, Switzerland announced the freezing of stocks owned by Assad and 13 of his closest assistants. The European Union is expected to implement more sanctions on the regime. However, political observers and Damascus do not believe these sanctions will have any major impact.
The United Nations is negotiating with the Libyan government, the revolutionaries, and NATO to reach a temporary ceasefire deal in Libya in order to deliver food and medical supplies to the besieged civilians. In Misrata, sporadic fighting is hindering efforts to distribute aid. Andrew Harden reports.
There are more and more signs that life is returning to normal in this besieged city. People politely wait in lines to buy bread. Men like Ibrahim have a daily routine of delivering weapons to the front lines. Ibrahim is one of the most prominent leaders in Misrata's defense operations. This job suits him, a former key defender in the Libyan national soccer team and coach for the local team until the revolution broke out. Ibrahim takes his children to see the ruins of their house. Colonel Gaddafi's forces bombed the area for weeks, but they were forced to withdraw. The city seems to be safe, at least for the time being.
I'm here despite all my training, all my plans and goals since I was a child, and my education.
Hours later, some of Ibrahim's colleagues come back wounded from the front lines, about 50 kilometers from the city. They were ambushed. Gaddafi's forces still pose a major threat here. Despite the chaos, there's order inside the city. Here, food has been distributed to workers in basic facilities such as hospitals. Among the workers here is Khaled, who has become a major figure in directing the revolution in Misrata.
For a week, Misrata has been living a new life. I hope that we have already overcome the most difficult phase.
Another
sign of improvement is the restoration of electricity in the neighborhood where Lutfi lives, but his family cannot relax yet. Lutfi, an electrician who became a revolutionary sniper, may have to return to the front lines.
I will not give up until we settle the matter with Gaddafi. We will kill him or arrest him and put him and his family on trial.
Thus,
the besieged city adapts to the circumstances and waits patiently for freedom to come.
The Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC, Abdul Latif Al-Zayani, has once again left Sana'a empty-handed. Despite the minor amendments that were made to the Gulf Initiative, Al-Zayani was unable to convince the opposition and the authority in Yemen to sign the power transition deal. Yesterday, Al-Zayani announced that Yemenis were very close to signing the GCC deal. Our correspondent, Abdul Rahman Al-Shumari, reports from Sana'a.
5 أيام من المشاورات المكثفة لم تفلح في تجاوز أزمة.
5 days of intensive consultations have failed to defuse the Gulf Initiative crisis. Hours before leaving Yemen, the GCC's Secretary General announced that the opposition and the authority had accepted the newly amended power transition deal.
أدخلت عليه بعض التعديلات مرة أخرى.
However, last-minute diplomatic wrangling has derailed the deal, as Gulf mediators were unable to find a mutually accepted formula.
العامل العسكري لن يجدي بحل الأزمة في اليمن.
The military option will not help resolve the crisis in Yemen. There have been major defections among members of the military and armed forces. Everyone is betting on the youths at the protest squares.
Despite the secrecy surrounding the meetings between Al-Zayani, Western diplomats, and Yemeni politicians, many reasons for the failure of their diplomatic efforts leaked, most notably the insistence of the ruling party to sign the Gulf Initiative with certain parties it deems legitimate. In addition, the regime said it will not sign the deal until all protest rallies and sit-ins are called off, which the opposition strongly rejects.
No powers in the world, whether they are from the authority, the opposition, or the international community, will be able to put an end to the sit-ins at the protest squares. The youths will not end their sit-ins until their primary demand is met, which is the toppling of the regime.
This position is somewhat similar to that which is adopted by the revolution youths, who outline their demands in 3 bullet points: rejecting legal immunity for Saleh, not allowing any group to negotiate on their behalf, and completing the final phase of their revolution by marching to the presidential palace. Amid Yemeni politicians' fluctuating positions, tremendous efforts that have lasted for weeks have been exerted to ensure the success of the Gulf Initiative. All of these efforts have failed, bringing the situation back to square one, with many Yemenis continuing to wonder, what's next? Abdul Rahman Al-Shumari, Dubai TV, Sana'a.
كشفت منظمة أطباء من أجل حقوق الإنسان أنها وثقت بالأدلة.
Physicians for Human Rights documented the systematic, atrocious, and cruel violations of Bahraini authorities who have been arresting, torturing, and killing civilians. The organization considered the authorities' actions a violation of international law, the price of which is paid by all the Bahraini people.
الجسم الطبي في البحرين تحت عنف السلطة. هذا هو عنوان تقرير نشرته منظمة أطباء.
The Bahrain authorities' violence against the medical institution is the title of a report published by Physicians for Human Rights. It unveiled the ongoing violations of Bahraini forces, backed by Saudi occupation forces, against medical staff, patients, and injured protesters. The report confirms that the organization recorded all violations by documenting medical records and x-rays of demonstrators who were beaten and tortured. It also investigated the suspicious deaths of 4 individuals detained by security forces. The organization's probes proved the injured and detained were subjected to atrocious violations, ranging from torture to beatings, humiliation, rape, and death threats. The report indicates security forces used gunfire at short distances and machine guns on peaceful demonstrators.
بالاغتصاب والقتل ويشير التقرير إلى إفراط قوات الأمن باستخدام القوة عبر إطلاق النار من مسافة قريبة.
In addition, the forces detained and tortured a number of protesters in order to forcefully extract confessions to having engaged in subversive activities that are completely removed from reality. The organization's report lifted the mask on conclusive evidence of the Bahraini authorities' systematic targeting of over 100 medical professionals by kidnapping them.
السلطات البحرينية لأكثر من 100 موظف طبي بشكل ممنهج عبر عمليات اختطاف.
Masked security forces kidnapped doctors from their homes at night, handcuffing and blindfolding them. The report also reveals an attack on an ambulance that was prevented from reaching people who needed medical care. This was followed by forcing paramedics to surrender their uniforms to the police, who would in turn wear them to kidnap protesters.
وإجبار المسعفين على تسليم لباسهم للشرطة.
The report also confirmed the Bahraini security forces' crackdown and disruption of the work of doctors. This was completed by transforming the main hospital to a military barrack, preventing the medical staff and patients from entering or exiting, destroying hospital buildings, kidnapping specialists, and then detaining and isolating them from the outside world. This was done in addition to tracking down injured protesters by looking for them in hospitals, then humiliating, beating, and torturing them and expelling them from hospitals, despite their need for medical care.
وإذلال وضرب وتعذيب المصابين وهم في المراكز الطبية.
Physicians for Human Rights concludes its report by considering all these acts a violation of international law, the price of which is paid by all the Bahraini people. The organization wondered why the U.S. administration, the main ally of the Bahraini authorities, remains silent on clear human rights violations. It also pointed to the U.S.'s double standard in dealing with this issue, despite its ability to influence the Bahraini regime.
We're going to try to break some of the fluff away and find out exactly whether there's anything new that the U.S. President said in this speech. Our guests for this news analysis include Middle East expert Christopher Walker, who joins us from London. We also have international lawyer Franklin Lamb joining us from Beirut. Rounding up the list, Director of Come Home America, Kevin Zeese, who joins us via Skype from New York. Thank all my guests. Let me first go to Christopher Walker. Christopher Walker, this is the first speech really officially by the U.S. President, and of course we can look back on the speech in Cairo, in which it was a new beginning that the U.S. President said back then. What accomplishments did the United States make since then? I mean, really, if you want to look at it, what was new in Obama's speech?
Well, that speech in 2009 raised lots of expectations, and frankly, a lot of them haven't been realized, although the Americans are claiming general credit for him leading, as it were, the idea of an Arab Spring, that is, the people gathering against the dictators. I'm afraid the same might happen with this speech, because in the West, the piece that's most notable is the fact that for the first time he's come out saying that a future Palestinian state must stick to the 1967 boundaries. But the trouble is, the speech contains no means for that to be obtained, i.e. for the removal of the some 300,000 settlers who are now within those boundaries since the 67 war. And all he talks about is agreed swaps, but that really is a very vague phrase. So I'm afraid that if the Arab people get worked up and excited on behalf of the Palestinians that there's been an American change of heart, there is not going to be necessarily a change of policy on the ground. They will have to just see how tough he is with Mr. Netanyahu when they meet in Washington this Friday. But it's noticeable that both he and Mr. Netanyahu have meetings with AIPAC, the lobbying organization on behalf of Jews and Israel in America.
Franklin Lamb, really, I mean, at a time, maybe the speech in Cairo was really important back then, but this speech is more important in a matter of speaking, because you're looking at a bunch of skeptical Arabs, people really skeptical of the United States. So was he able to penetrate and break that?
Yes. Well, I would like to say I'm a bit more sanguine than our colleague in London. I think the speech is, in a sense, historic, in that it's the first time that an American president has committed to the 67 borders, which, remember, some years ago, that was, unheard of. Plus, the mutually agreed land swaps doesn't bother me all that much, because the new leadership that I think will form from the Palestinians, I think they're very capable of driving a hard bargain. It's not for me to advise them what to do, but some are going to say that they're not going to exchange one grain of sand. That would be consistent with international law if they refuse to do that. I think the speech was aimed at those young people. I think Obama is very inspired, as all of us we are by the Islamic and the Muslim awakening, and by making that declaration, I would choose to think that he was directing that to the young people and the old people who are revolting around the region. So I think it's important. I agree with our colleague from London. The details we don't know yet. But, I think it was Lenin, wasn't it, who said that for decades, nothing happens. And then within a week, decades happen. And that's what's going on now. The handwriting's on the wall. Israel knows what that language sees. Before I came on this program, I checked the Drudge report and the Zionist press. They're terrified. Drudge is saying that Obama caved into the Palestinians. That's the Zionist message. He's going to have a tough time with Congress in the short term. But he might have more support than from the American people than people think, because it is neither an American value nor an American interest to keep this entity, the Zionist occupation, as he mentioned twice the word occupation, going. It's unsustainable, he said, unsustainable. What president has used that before?
President Barack Obama completely misunderstands the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and chances for progress in the peace process are near zero. That's the view of Middle East analyst Dr. Dan Shuftan, who told IBA's Efrat Batat that the only way to achieve a relative calm in the area is through unilateral withdrawal from areas in the West Bank.
I'm recommending a gradual approach, unilateral, that is designed to improve our relations with the United States. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the Palestinians.
But we've seen an example in Gaza where we gave up land and we got increased rocket firing.
I think the Gaza disengagement was an enormous success, and I disagree with mainstream Israeli public opinion that thinks otherwise, because the question is, what is your objective? You live next to Palestinians, you'll have terrorism. Because in the Palestinian community, even if the government is different, you will have strong enough violent elements that will not be under control. I don't think that that's a realistic possibility. The question is, if we have generations of conflict with Arabs and Palestinians, and this is more clear now than ever before, by far the most important thing is a strong Israeli society. And in my book, an Israeli society without Gaza is stronger than an Israeli society with Gaza. An Israeli society without Nablus is stronger than an Israeli society with Nablus.
In Lebanon, the education sector is ringing an alarm bell as a general strike was held in public and vocational schools, the Lebanese university, and most private schools. It was accompanied by a threat to escalate measures in the coming days.
These playgrounds can no longer accommodate their students. Birds took over, announcing the return of the constitutional institutions vacuum. Public schools and the Lebanese university closed, while private schools displayed timid solidarity with the general strike, which was staged in protest of the political vacuum and paralysis of the country. Do you know why there's a strike?
I think it's for teachers' rights.
They strike every year. I don't know if striking works well at the end of the year.
For the first time, we're raising a major issue. For a long time, the mobilization of teachers and professors' unions have been leading the issue on a nationwide level. The message is that we need to exit this crisis according to our constitutional institutions. The Lebanese people are paying the price today, while merchants make up their own rules. We are sounding the alarm bell. Our message to the officials is that the people in these sectors need to be taken care of. We say to them, either form a government or get Parliament to legislate. I cannot be a false witness to the events taking place, and silence is a sign of acceptance. We refuse to be silent. We hope this mobilization will be echoed across all unions and civil society institutions.
Today's general strike was respected across the board, and the threat to escalate measures might soon be realized. It is a blow by the teachers, a strike against the strike. The education sector took the strike to the homes of the Lebanese, as over 80,000 teachers and 1 million students went on strike today to protest the government's strike. Salma Al-Haj, New TV.
Egypt is a guest of honor at the 64th Cannes Film Festival with a strong artistic presence. A number of Egyptian films inspired by the revolution participated in the festival.
After these films are screened, an official dinner and ceremony will be held in honor of Egypt, featuring a musical performance by Wastal Balad troupe. The festival's administration will also hold a press conference for 2 films, 18 Days and An Ant's Shout, with the participation of the 2 films' crews. In addition, another greeting will be organized for the 2 films' general crews to meet with Arab and foreign filmmakers.
Egypt was chosen as the guest of honor at the 64th Cannes International Film Festival. This is considered one of Egypt's most important achievements of the January 25th revolution, especially on the world's artistic stage. This year's festival will feature a strong presence of Egypt, including the screening of Egyptian films and forums and conferences about Egypt's film industry. In the Egyptian wing of the festival's film hall, 2 meetings will be held for the Egyptian delegation of filmmakers and Egyptian communities to meet with Arab and foreign filmmakers participating in the festival. The movie, 18 Days, is one of the most important Egyptian movies featured in the festival. It is comprised of 10 short films produced by 10 different Egyptian directors during Egypt's 18-day protest that led to the downfall of former Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak and the victory of the revolution. The Cannes Festival will showcase 2 long films from Egypt in the classical category. A new version of Ihsan Kamal al-Bustajil, made in 1968, as well as an Ant's Shout by Samih Abdelaziz, starring Omar Abdelghalil, made in 2011. The revenue generated from the screening of these films will be allocated to aid convoys to help Egyptian villagers with political and civil development. The choice of Egypt as the guest of honor at one of the world's largest film festivals brought Egyptian cinema back into the world's movie theaters. This was an announcement for Egypt's youth and the spring of the silver screen.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs, programs which connect you to the world.